Hey, it's Todd Gross, and I'm about to do something a little bit unconventional. Are you ready? I'm going to take one of the modules, the green screen module, out of Camtasia Mastery, the great training series that's coming out on the 27th. I'm recording this just before it comes out. You may be watching this after it's already out. I'm going to give you that module and put my comments within it. So in other words, you're going to see the best green screen training, period, not just for Camtasia, but in general, that you've ever seen. And I'm going to make comments to make it even better. I'm going to actually just sort of cut in and interrupt Ron, and you'll see my comments to make it even better. This is a big deal. I'm giving this to you right now in this very video that you're watching. And if you like it, you'll be able to actually see a whole lot more training on how to not just do green screen, but work with Camtasia 9 or Camtasia 8. There's training for both, especially for Camtasia 9, the latest. And Camtasia 9 is virtually the same now as Camtasia 3 for Mac. And that's why I love it, because I use a Mac. So I've been following along with this training too from Ron. All right, so without further ado, here's what I'm going to do. If you have VideoPal, by the way, this will be very pertinent to you in terms of removing green screen from around any spokesperson videos that you pick up from around the web. If you're just in general want to know how to do green screen technique, this is going to show you no matter what software you have. And third, if you have Camtasia, I'm also going to give you most of that. I'm not going to show you all of it, but most of it right now, the actual module that's inside Camtasia Mastery in terms of removing green screen there. So get ready. We'll go straight to the green screen trainer with my comments thrown in as well. Watch.
I want to start off this module by discussing the background. And what I mean by that is not the green that's behind me, but the replacement background. When we use green screening, we're taking out the green that's back here and we're replacing it with a different background. So let's think about some things that are important when considering that background. First, I want you to think about what that background will be. Are you planning on having an outdoor background? Are you planning on having an indoor background? If it's indoor, is it something like a kitchen? Is it something like a warehouse? If it's outdoors, is it very sunny? Is it very dark? Because those things we need to keep in mind before we set anything up in our green screening. We need to think about where the light is in the background. Let's say you're using an outdoor scene. Maybe the sun is coming in from this side, and so there's more light on the things in the background from this direction, so there should be more light on you also from that direction. What if instead you weren't thinking about the background ahead of time, you had a little bit more light on this side of you, but everything in the background had light from the other direction? It would look out of place. And so in order for you to look like you fit into the background, it's important for you to consider that background first and then light yourself accordingly. We'll talk about lighting in the next section. Another thing to consider about backgrounds is what kind of background do you want to use? Do you want it to be something that is a still image or something that is a video that's moving in the background? So if you had an outdoor shot, do you want the leaves to be blowing and moving on the trees, or do you just want it to be something that is steady and unmoving? Also a consideration is whether or not you want that thing in the background to be in focus or out of focus. It might be that that thing in the background is further back and you want to blur it. And we also want to talk about clothing to make sure your clothing matches the background. If it's a winter scene and you're in a t-shirt, that doesn't necessarily fit, or vice versa. If it's a summer scene and you're all bundled up and you have maybe a hoodie on or something like that, that might not fit either. So consider that for your clothing, as well as the color choices for your clothing. In the rest of this course, I'm using a green shirt. I'm wearing a green shirt. Here, I'm choosing a blue shirt, and I'm choosing that for a reason because I don't want it to match the green, and I want to show you some things later on about how blue is close to green and how that could be pulled out as well. So make sure that you don't have anything too crazy for your colors. Make sure that there is no green in whatever it is that you're wearing or whatever the color is that you're going to pull out from your background.
All right, so my first interruption is going to be here because I think I could add a lot to the discussion. This is something that Ron left out, and that is you need to know whether you're putting a still or a video behind you, because then it depends on what is right and what is wrong. Let me explain. In this right here, you're looking at me in a video with snowflakes falling. Now, I'm in front of this cabin and the snow is it's a little hard to see right here, but let's say the snow is even heavier. It would be very obvious that the snowflakes weren't falling, as an example. So you need to keep in mind what the motion is. So for instance, if there was a car behind me here and it was a road, and the car was just stationary, but it was obvious that the car was driving, and you were showing a still image behind you, that would look wrong because the car should be moving. So in this case, it looks wrong as a still because the snowflakes are stuck in midair here. So as I actually speak, and I'll click play here in just a second, it would look wrong if the snowflakes weren't moving. But this is a video behind me, so it looks right that the snowflakes are moving. Hey JVs, it's Todd Gross. How you doing? Outside my winter cabin, putting on my gloves here. Now the other thing to notice, of course, is in terms of clothing, I'm wearing the right clothing for the weather. You heard that I was making a so-called JV video there, and I even joked that I was putting on my gloves. But I'm not outside. I'm inside. In fact, I'm not even in northern New England where this was taken. I'm inside my studio in Florida while I'm recording this. So I'm in Florida, inside, with a down jacket and a hat and gloves, so that it would look correct that I'm standing in front of this snowy scene.
I now want to talk about lighting your green screen. This is one of the most important things that you can do to get your keying right. Now, what we want to have is a consistent green across the back. Now, it's nearly impossible to get a purely consistent one color all the way across the back, but that's what we want to aim for. What we want to avoid are hot spots where the light is very bright and darker spots where the light isn't as bright. It makes it more difficult for the software to pull out those green colors, and you have to tweak things in order to get it to pull out more colors of green. So you can see in the background here that I've tried to make it as even as possible. Now I'm going to take these lights and I'm going to move them so you can see where I could create light spots or dark spots. So right now it's aimed directly at the background, and I'm going to move this away, and you can see that as I do that, there's a lot more that's warm over here on the right. It's warmer and very dark over here. And so what I tried to do was make sure that I had a consistent green as much as possible across here. And I tried turning this light at different angles to get the most consistent green that I could. Typically what I do is I have my lights up higher and then I aim them down. Now you can see that when I do this, that the area at the bottom becomes less green. It gets a little darker, so it's a little bit more difficult to key that out. So what I've done for this video is I've brought my light down to be right about in the middle of the screen. It's also good practice to light the background separate from your subject. Usually in videos I tell you, try to use your three-point lighting on the person, and that's all great. You want to continue to do that if you can. But if you're using green screening, it's most often recommended that you have separate lighting just for the green and then lighting for the professional.
Okay, I'm going to stop Ron again for just a moment. I'm actually showing another clip from Camtasia Mastery right here, where it says animations. That's something he looks at in one of the modules, and I just happen to have that on the screen. But I'm going to tell you about something completely separately. But if you are interested in Camtasia Mastery to get more of this training, not just green screen, then again, the link underneath this video, and as a special bonus, I'm going to do a webinar about green screen setup and removal. And I'm going to do that on a webinar with you guys live. That's going to be my bonus. All right, back to my point. Ron was talking about lighting. I light one of my studios very inexpensively with cheap lights that I got at Target, as a matter of fact, and I don't shine the lights directly on me. And here's the key to that. There is so much light sensitivity now to the new cameras that are coming out, such as the latest Canon cameras that you could pick up for just $500, as a matter of fact. So light sensitive that you really don't need any more bright lights. There's an advantage to that Ron doesn't mention. It's a trick that I learned a long time ago because I've always tried to do things inexpensively. Partially for you. I want to make sure that you can do it. And that trick is to not have bright lights on you, but to have all the light indirect by focusing it, pointing it at, let's say, the ceiling, like up here and on the walls, rather than directly at the subject. Now, what that does is it creates that diffuse light that he was talking about, and it doesn't create a hard shadow. Now, in just a moment, you'll hear him talking about shadows and what a problem that is. Okay, because when there's a shadow on the background, it's harder to get rid of the green because it produces two different shades of green. So one of the things you can do, rather than invest in expense diffuse lighting fixtures, expensive diffuse lighting fixtures is you can actually buy inexpensive lights and point them all over the place, anywhere but directly on you. And the light can bounce off the walls, especially if you have white walls. Like you can see he has a white behind him here. And the light would bounce back onto the green behind you.
In this video, I want to talk about the enemies of the green screen. And to help with this, I've enlisted a couple of friends. And the first one is Chewy. And Chewy is going to help us by demonstrating how hair can sometimes be difficult to key out. So if you have, ladies, if you have bigger hairstyles, that's sometimes more difficult, because what will happen is the green and the hair will be so close that sometimes part of your hair will disappear and then it will reappear. So in the case of having too much hair, what we recommend is that, ladies, if you can, wear your hair down, straight, tight, ponytail, something like that, to keep it as close to you as possible. Guys, of course, same deal. If you have it shorter, that's better. Keep it tight. If you can put some sort of hair product in to keep it all as close as possible, that's going to help you. The next enemy is shadows. If Chewy is too close to the green screen, then he gets a shadow. And the more shadows we have back here, the more difficult it is to key out that color. So we want to be sure that we are further away from the green screen to help with shadows. This also helps with reflection, because if I get too close to the green screen, then light that is bouncing off of the green will reflect onto my face or onto my skin, onto my arms, shoulders, whatever, onto Chewy, and any of that green that reflects is, again, difficult to get keyed out. The next enemy in green screening is a hard or a harsh light. You can see here that I have a very harsh light. It's very directional, as opposed to soft light, which will diffuse light and spread it out evenly. Remember, I said in the lighting section we want nice soft light, consistent light across the background. Here with this harsh light, it's going to be very difficult to get all that green out, because some of it actually looks white at this point. The next enemy of the green screen is similar to shadows, and that is wrinkles. Now, on my background, there are some wrinkles, and that's okay, but there were very heavy, very dark wrinkles where things were actually overlapping. Parts of the fabric were overlapping each other. So you want to make sure that your fabric isn't overlapping. So one thing that I used to get out some of those wrinkles was just an iron, and I stood here and I steamed the background, part of the background, not the whole thing, but the places where there were some heavy wrinkles, I used the iron to get those out. The other tool that I use to eliminate wrinkles is the clamp. And what I do is I will clamp the background to something around it so that it helps pull out any kind of sagging or any kind of folds that might naturally occur just whenever you're hanging any kind of fabric. And so what I found when I originally just laid this out is that the weight of the fabric, the bar isn't real sturdy, so it goes down like this, and so it ended up causing wrinkles in the corners. So all I did was I pulled the fabric as tight as I could and clamped it. You can clamp it right to the bar that you're using to hold it if it goes out far enough. If not, find something else that's low that you can clamp it to, and that's all I did, again, to help minimize any kind of wrinkles. The next enemy of green screening is other green. And I talked about this a little bit. I talked about attire and how you want to have some sort of clothing that is different than your black background. So here I have a monkey. He is green, but he's not exactly the same green as the back. So I might be able to pull out the background and not pull out the green on the monkey. But again, you want to avoid anything that's close to the background. So avoid those greens. You can also see these wearing stripes. That's not good. You don't want to wear stripes whenever you're doing any kind of recording. So any clothing that has a pattern, you probably want to avoid. Solid colors are better, but definitely avoid anything close to green whenever you are trying to take out your green background. The other thing that Mr. Monkey is going to help us with is motion. This is one of the most difficult things to key out. So if Mr. Monkey is sitting here and he's jumping around and he's having a good time, what happens is that there's motion blur. So even with my hands, if you see my hand moving back and forth like this, that's going to be horrible to try and key out. So be aware of your motion. Try and minimize any kind of movement. Now, you don't want to stand there completely still and motionless. That doesn't make for a very engaging video. But similarly, you don't want to be wild moving your arms and just moving these crazy gestures. It's so difficult to get those things out of green screening if you're moving like a wild man. So calm it down, be aware of your movement, keep those movements fluid, keep them slower, and you'll do a whole lot better. Okay, so now we're in Camtasia. Before I start removing the green from the background from those previous videos, I want to show you how the different tools in Camtasia work, and I want to show you them by using this color wheel. So you know that we have our visual effects here on the left, and what we want to do is remove a color. That's the chroma keying or the green screening. So I'm going to drag this effect down to this clip. Now you can see when I do that, that immediately there's a section of the green that's missing. But let's understand, we have these sliders. What do each of these do? And I'm going to drag softness down and tolerance down to 0. So right now, the first thing is it chooses a color. And we'll be able to choose a color, and we'll do that when we get to our video. But for now, let's understand these sliders. First, let's start with tolerance. I'm going to click on tolerance, and then I'm going to move my right arrow on my keyboard to just increment by 1%, 2%, 3. So you can see here at 3%, it's found a section of green. Now I'm going to continue to tap to the right, and you can see that the further I go, the more green it's pulling out. So you can see it's moving out almost like a circle, pulling out more and more green. And you can see that it's even getting a little bit close to blue, a little close to yellow, closer to white, and closer to black. So it's getting a lot more greens. The further I go, the more greens are being pulled out. So the first part, tolerance, is going to be the colors of green that we're pulling out. More green as we go further to the right, less green as we go further to the left. Now for softness, I'm going to click on softness, and I'm going to, again, use my right arrow on my keyboard. And you can see for softness, what it's doing is it's not pulling out green, but it's making greens more transparent. In other words, it's changing the opacity and bringing the opacity down so that I can see through to the background. And the further I go to the right, again, more and more of this is getting to be almost invisible. And what softness does is it picks up where the tolerance left off. So let me show you what I mean here. If I go back to tolerance and drop this down, notice that the softness also appears to be going down. It's not, it's still the same range, but it's picking up where the tolerance left off. So if I come down to this point at 0 on the tolerance, or actually I'll start here at 3, you can see that the softness went out from that point. So if I go here, there's no softness, and as I go out, it's saying wherever I left off from, so softness of 0 says I'm not taking any of those greens, but the next couple of greens as I go out, it's going to make less visible. So think about where tolerance leaves off, softness is going to pick up. So to review, tolerance is going to pick out a range of colors that will pull out. Softness will then make the next range in that series less visible, and so it'll begin to make those more transparent. And with defringe, it will pick up with the colors that the softness left off from. And as I move my arrow keys to the right, you can see that it's taking the color out completely. It's leaving the grayscale behind, but the color, as I continue to move to the right, is being stripped entirely from it. The last slider is hue, and what that does is it adds a little bit of color from the opposite side of the color wheel. So let me remove all of this, and I'll just show you real quick what I mean. You can see that the color we chose here was green, and you can see where that is on the color wheel. If I go to the other side of the color wheel, it's this magenta color or purple color. So if I take hue and I start increasing the hue, watch the white. This is like a perfect white background. As I go and drag this to the right, notice that those things around where the white is, it turned to this purpley kind of color. And so what it's doing is it's adding the color opposite it in the color wheel to the image or the video. Now, I often don't use hue. I often leave that all the way down.
Okay, so I'm going to actually back up. You're actually looking at the video that we just watched, and I'm going to back it up and talk where he talks about hue. You see where he's talking about hue over here, and he says that it points to the opposite side, and he doesn't usually use hue? That's not such a great idea not to use hue, and I'll tell you why I use it. So if we look very closely at Ron, let's actually look at him right here, okay? I'm going to zoom in. All right, so I'm zooming in on Ron right here. You notice that he even has a little bit of green showing up on his right cheek. You're seeing it on the left, but that's actually his right cheek. Notice as we zoom in here, there's a little bit of green on his finger. And if we really zoom in, you could probably detect maybe a little bit of green outline on his clothing. But certainly you could see the green over here like that. Now, the way to get rid of that, to sort of tweak it, is exactly what he just showed to do, and that is to increase the hue just a little bit, because what it does is it takes the opposite of the green and it brings it in to neutralize it. Now, the key is not to do it too much, because what it will do is it will make your eyes white, and his white t-shirt, his eyes that are white will turn that purple color that he showed. And his white t-shirt would turn purple as well. But it would also completely wipe out that green coloration. So the idea is to just tweak it a little bit. And I do that a lot in Camtasia. And the reason I do it is to get rid of that little bit of green that really can just stay there, that's very hard to remove. If you're looking at the timeline here, you'll see that I actually am not going to show you the rest. I'm leaving just a little bit out, about 7 or 8, 9 minutes out of the end of this training for green screen. The reason I'm doing that is I don't know if I legally have the right to show you the whole thing without you purchasing this actual product, but you've seen a lot of it, so you have a really good idea not only on how to do green screen in Camtasia or green screen in general, some of the things to look out for between Ron and my training, but you also have a good idea of what this product, Camtasia Mastery, is going to be like. If you're interested in that product, and it's not out yet, just click that link below and click it at the right time. I think it's being released at 9 a.m. That's 9 o'clock Eastern Time on the 27th of April, 2017, and that's when it will be available. Now, my special bonus for getting that product is going to be live, a webinar green screen training. Now, I've done this before. It was extremely successful. It was about 3 years ago, and it really went well. So I am going to give you, of course, the instructions on how to get involved with that. That will be part of the bonus. So make sure that you pick up Camtasia Mastery from my link if you want that.